We've got Brian Skelly with William Raveis Mortgage with us. And you said something about the this debt deal now, because let's face it, America's still the reserve currency. I think over 60% of countries, it might even be higher than that, have America as the reserve currency. Like we are a long ways away from not being the reserve currency in the world. But it's a little bit more risky today than it was maybe decades ago to invest in America. Brian, you believe that you're seeing things that suggest the 30-year fixed is going to go up because of this. I mean, based off of the news, the 10-year has come down and the 30-year has come down a little bit this week versus last week. Maybe you're not seeing that. I mean, you're looking at it every day. I'd love for you to dive into what you mean by the 30-year fix potentially going up.
Yeah. So, I mean, I generally try not to predict what rates are going to do because there's so frequently new news that comes out that can make it go up and down that people didn't expect. Like, I mean, just in the last couple of years, we had a global pandemic. There's been wars. I remember, years ago, like all of a sudden one summer, everybody thought the rates were going to go up, and then all of a sudden Greece was going to go bankrupt and the rates went way down. So I try not to go on record of saying what rates are going to do because I'm right about half the time. But this news this is one way to interpret this news. So before the break, we were saying, the government basically spent all of the money that they have in their checking account, almost all of it, because of this debt ceiling issue. And now they're going to have to refill the bank account so they can pay their bills. And how does the U.S. government do that? They issue government bonds, which they call that debt. So basically, in order to generate cash to pay their bills, they're going to have to find investors to buy bonds. And this is a supply and demand issue. It's like, imagine you're running a lemonade stand on a really hot day, right? When you're a kid. And your first couple customers, they come up to you, they're really, really thirsty, right? They might pay you $5 for a glass of lemonade, and they might really enjoy that glass of lemonade. But after you've sold your first glasses to all the really thirsty people, then you got some more people that are not quite as thirsty anymore, and they're only going to pay you $1. And then you've got everybody, they've already had a glass of lemonade, and you're like, hey, do you want to buy a second or third glass? And like, no, I don't really want to pay $1 for another glass. But maybe they pay 50 cents or a quarter for a glass of lemonade. Shout out to my high school economics professor, Mr. Brooks. If he's listening to this right now, he's loving this. So anyways, the point of the story is that that's how supply and demand works. When you have a little bit of something, you can get a lot of money for it. When you have a lot of something, to sell that at that last little bit, you're not going to get as much for it. And that's what's going to happen with the U.S. government debt. They have to generate $1 trillion by the end of August, according to some experts that we were reading from the B of A Global Strategist and the Marketplace article. So, the first 100 million might be easy, or the first 100 billion might be easy. But, when you guys start getting that 800 billion, 900 billion, $1 trillion, like they're going to have to raise rates. That's the equivalent of the lemonade salesperson making the lemonade cheaper in order to sell that last glass of lemonade to the person who doesn't want it. It's like the whole world is going to be like, hey, we have enough government debt. You've satisfied our desire for government debt. But the U.S. government is going to be like, yeah, but we need another 500 billion. And the only way that the whole world is going to buy this government debt is if we say, well, what if we pay you a higher rate on this debt? And then the rest of the world's going to be like, okay, fine. If you're going to pay us more money, we'll buy your debt. And that's going to make rates go higher. And then, we got trillions of dollars in mortgages that we got to sell too that's competing with this government debt. So if all these banks are selling all these mortgages and they got to get somebody to buy them, they're going to have to do the same thing. They're going to have to increase the rates to get the investors to buy these mortgages.
Well, I tell you what, every time it hits up over 7%, like it did last week and into the beginning of this week, according to Mortgage News Daily, I'd love to know your local update on rates right now, Brian. But every time we go nationally on average above 7%, as we've seen in the last week, we see mortgage applications across the country drop. We've seen that now for 2 weeks straight. And we see home affordability reach a level that we haven't seen since just before the great financial crisis. So anything over 7%, we've seen resistance from home shoppers. And there are a lot of economists that believe Lance Lambert from Fortune or Logan Motashambi from Housing Wire are both on record as saying if we see sustained 7+% 30-year fixed mortgage rates, eventually the lagging indicator 3-6 months down the line is going to be drops in home values. We haven't seen that yet in Connecticut. Well, we've got Connecticut numbers update that we'll do before the end of the show, and maybe we'll a little bit deeper into that next week. But if we get sustained 7% 30-year fixed, Brian, I believe we're going to have less home shoppers and naturally lower home values over time.
Maybe. I think less home buyers. There's such, now I'm just talking from my own personal experience. I mean, I've pre-approved a lot of people compared to how many people have actually bought a house.
What's the rate right now that you're doing locally in Connecticut here?
Well, I'm not supposed to quote a specific rate on the radio for compliance reasons. I'd have to give an APR and a whole bunch of disclosures and stuff. But I mean, I will say that Freddie Mac does a survey of a whole bunch of mortgage lenders every Thursday. And they said at this Thursday, the average rate was 6.79, which was the highest that it's been since the first week in November. So to answer your earlier question, I did see a couple days this week where rates got better, like on a day-to-day basis. But if you're just looking at the every Thursday, Freddie Mac does a survey. You know, this week it was 6.79. Last week it was 6.57. The week before that it was 6.39. So it's pretty much climbed pretty consistently every week for the last 3 weeks. And that's what we're seeing.